So I'm here with Brian Frier, Honorary Professor of Diabetes in Edinburgh, and you're the awardee of this year's Camillo Golgi Prize. Could you tell us a little bit about your background? How did you get into diabetes? How about your career in general?
Well, first of all, I did medicine for purely interest in the biological sciences. I wouldn't say I had any altruistic motivation. And I did my medical degree in Edinburgh and my early medical training there. And it soon becomes apparent whether you're interested in medicine or surgery. And I rapidly sort of gravitated towards the medical specialties. And you do general medicine, of course. And diabetes and endocrinology interested me. So that's how I started in that area. And from a research point of view, at that time, it was very important that young doctors did research. We were trained really to be clinical scientists. And you needed publications to progress your career. And particularly, you needed a higher degree to get a consultant job, particularly if you wanted in a really good, top quality teaching hospital. So that was the motivation. There was no proper training schemes for that. You made up your own training and you followed sort of whatever interests were available or what you thought was going to be useful in terms of your specialty. So, you know, like many things, as I said, it's by chance rather than design. As far as my research interests are concerned, I went initially to New York and worked for a year as a research fellow in a department who was doing work on cholesterol metabolism and diabetes. And while it was a useful experience, I can't say that that was the subject that made me very excited. It was also very difficult to do. You needed a lot of funding, you needed a lot of isotope facilities. So when I returned to Edinburgh, I had a temporary position in an academic department, and I was asked by the senior physician there, would I set up a C-peptide assay, because that was very much the flavor of the month at the time. And I went to Copenhagen, saw Lisa Heading. She showed me how to do this, and I came back and applied this in Edinburgh. And somebody was doing some work on hypoglycemia, so we thought, let's do some work there and measure C-peptide. And that's basically how I started. And after that, I've done a lot of work in hypoglycemia, so that's how I got into that direction.
Okay, thank you very much. So is there anything you would, that you could recommend to young scientists today to advance their career in diabetes?
Well, when it comes to doing research, I think, first of all, it's essential you do in something you find interesting. I mean, I didn't find cholesterol metabolism interesting, and it was difficult. So there's no easy research. I mean, all the easy things were done a long time ago, but it's important to find a proper question to try and answer, and then design appropriate experiments with help, with mentoring. There's very few people who know what to do right from the start. So if somebody wants to go into research, I think it's very good if they can get a post in a big department with somebody who they can use or can work with as their mentor, and learn various research techniques and pursue a particular line of research which is going to give some useful answers. And whether that's in pure science or translational work or in clinical work, the basic fundamental thing is the same. And of course, what everybody wants is then publications, recognition, and that often takes you on to some other aspect of the topic. Now, some people use a butterfly approach. They flit from one thing to the next. But I think in the long term, it's quite important to be focused in one area which you can then explore in depth. And that's usually how people end up writing a thesis, for example.
Mm-hmm. And hopefully get a Camillo Golgi Prize at some point.
Yes, well, that's at the end of many years of practice. And of course, I wouldn't like people to think that I had done all this work myself. I haven't. Of course, you have a succession of research fellows, and they do all the hard graft. You think up the ideas, you get the money for them to do it, but they do the work. And I've been extremely lucky in that the people I've selected to work with me as research fellows have been excellent. Almost entirely, every single one has been excellent. I can't say they've always been in a hurry to write up their work. That sometimes need a bit of prompting, but usually it's been published in top quality journals, and that of course then gives your department a good reputation, and it makes other young people want to come and work there.
Okay, so your lecture title is Recurrent Hypoglycemia and Diabetes, the Long-Term Complications. Can you give us a very short overview so that in the end people will go on the virtual meeting to see the whole talk?
Sure. Well, the Camillo Golgi lecture is supposedly to be on diabetic complications, nephropathy, neuropathy, and so on. But hypoglycemia is really a major complication of therapy, of treatment. However, if people are exposed to that over many years, they develop syndromes which are hypoglycemia induced and are really then complications of diabetes. And the major one is impaired awareness of hypoglycemia, and that's going to be the main thrust of my talk. In association with that, you get counter-regulatory hormone deficiencies. But that's been explored in great depth in the 1980s, 1990s. So I'm not going to I'll mention it, but I'm not going to say too much about that. I think the main area which is of great clinical importance is impaired awareness. It affects almost 1 in 4 people with type 1 diabetes. It affects people on insulin with type 2 diabetes. It has enormous implications for their life. They're exposed to very much more frequent severe hypoglycemia, affects their family. It's very difficult to manage. So I'm going to explore some of the mechanisms and some of the ways that we might try and treat it. But in addition to that, I'm going to put in a bit towards the end of the talk about how hypoglycemia may actually aggravate the vascular complications of diabetes, both the micro and the macrovascular complications. Because there is accumulating evidence that hypoglycemia is bad for blood vessels and may actually accelerate atherosclerosis and microangiopathy. It's something which I put forward with Jannik Hilsted from Copenhagen back in 1985. We published that in The Lancet to a degree of skepticism. But as time has gone on, it's becoming more and more evident that this is actually a true concept.
Okay, and where do you see the future of all this?
Well, there are 2 or 3 areas at the moment in hypoglycemia which I'm not going to discuss, but which are of great clinical importance. One is, does recurrent hypoglycemia lead to significant cognitive decline and possibly dementia? And the other is the role in hypoglycemia on the cardiovascular system. And all of the big studies now, the big trials which are looking at treatment of diabetes are concerned about hypoglycemia and what impact it may have. And this is an area, I think, which is currently expanding rapidly. So these are 2 big areas, clinical areas in hypoglycemia, which I think are going to get a lot of attention in the next few years.
Yes, and then of course the different new efforts to treat hypoglycemia with stem cells, with the artificial pancreas. Yes,
and in fact, the one way of eradicating it is with transplantation. So whether you have whole organ transplantation or stem cells, that will get rid of it. But as you're well aware, at the moment, it's the stem cell side of things is a big challenge. Not because it doesn't work, but the supply is the problem. So until we can get a way of making lots of stem cells or harvesting them from individuals so that it can be reused and tried to restore insulin secretion, then this is a big challenge.
Yes, and the safety.
And the safety aspects, yeah.
Okay, thank you very much.